mindful of your time. So we'll get started. Again, thank you all for being here this morning. As we get started, my name is Chris Silva. I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce, but I think I know everybody on the call so far. Welcome to our quarterly Q&A. And today, before we get started, as you know, you probably heard this is being recorded. So we have some questions to get through, and if you have any follow-up questions based on the topic, please write that in the chat and I'll see that. And I'm happy to ask the question on your behalf, but if you would like to ask the question yourself, please indicate that in the chat and then I'll turn it over to you to ask the question yourself, okay? So we'll get through a few of the questions that we have already submitted. And then if we have time, we'll also entertain any additional questions at the end. So we're honored to have with us State Representative Carol Doherty today. Carol is the representative of the 3rd Bristol District, Taunton and Easton, and she's in her 5th and unfortunately final term as member of the Taunton School Committee. Her career and community service have focused primarily on education. She was elected president of the Mass Teachers Association, serving 2 consecutive terms there. She was later appointed Director of Professional Development in the School of Education at Northeastern University, where she remained for 18 years. In addition to serving on the school committee, her volunteer activities include co-hosting the Silver City Meeting House radio program on WBBF. That's a show dedicated to promoting civil dialogue on issues facing our community. Representative Doherty also serves on the board of directors for the Downtown Taunton Foundation and Triumph, the community's Head Start early intervention initiatives. So I'd like to invite Carol just to say a few opening words and before we launch into our questions today. Thanks,
well,
Carol.
Thank you very much for getting up so early in the morning, although for most, if not all of you, you do this on a regular basis. So joining the chamber and providing me an opportunity to get to know you and to chat with you. I know that there are a lot of burning questions, as I have basically the same questions that you have, particularly around the ARPA funds and the disposition of the legislature in that regard. So we'll talk a little bit about that this morning. And the other burning question, at least on the minds of some of the general public, as well as the governor recently, complained that the State House for legislators at any rate in their offices is not yet open. So I have been seated for a year and a half here in my office at home. Although I've been in and out of the State House occasionally over that period of time to pick up mail and so forth. But so that's the one missing piece for me. So we legislate virtually, much like we are chatting this morning virtually. So it has been an interesting journey for me. As I get to know people, things started to loosen up. So there are some rare occasions where there are district-wide events that go on. So I get to meet my colleagues, but it's always like, oh yes, I recognize you from the little square in our meeting mode. So we have been legislating virtually all of this time. So the word is that the speaker has announced that staff will go in December 13th, or start to go in December 13th, and then imagining the rest of us, the legislature, will go in the first of the year. So I'm really looking forward to that. We keep our fingers crossed around the Omicron variant, that it is stopped in its tracks here, so that it allows us to continue on leading our lives. So thanks for asking. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Carol. So I will start with welcome to those of you who joined us just a little bit late. We're about to launch into our questions. And if you have a follow-up to the topic, please write that in the chat. That will come to me. I'm happy to ask on your behalf, but if you'd like to ask yourself, just indicate that in the chat, in the chat as well. And I'm happy to turn that over to you. So the first question is, and you just gave us a little spoiler, what can you tell us about ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, and how that will impact local businesses?
So yesterday I had an opportunity to serve as a co-host on a local cable show called South Coast Matters, and Senator Mike Rodrigues, who is Senate Ways and Means and the Joint Committee Ways and Means, was the guest. And so I was hoping that he would have some secret to tell me that the bill was about to be signed off on by the conference committee and that it would be swiftly dispatched to the governor, but no. his hope is that it will get done by Christmas, but it is in conference committee. I think that both the Senate and the House did due diligence with that bill and dispatched it very quickly to the conference committee. And the conference committee is still in deliberation, and we are not, the rank and file are not privy to what it is that is keeping the parties apart. But I think that once done, it's going to be obviously extraordinarily beneficial to the Commonwealth, with over $4 billion to be distributed across the cities and towns. When we deliberated, there was statewide actions that we took, so millions of dollars for statewide activity, and then regional activity and local activity. So I can share with you some of the highlights of that in terms of what you might be interested in. So there's the UI Trust Fund. There's $500 million, and we can talk in more depth about what's going on with that a little later. But there is $500 million in the ARPA bill to replenish the Unemployment Trust Fund. It's controversial. Some people think that's enough. Some people think that it is not enough. There's $200 million worth of tax relief for small businesses that pay the small businesses that paid personal income tax on state or federal relief awards during the pandemic. $60 million for grants to support small businesses negatively impacted by the pandemic, with $35 million of that going to minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. It's $125 million to the Mass Cultural Council, $40 million to youth summer programs and jobs for youth, $500 million toward providing premium pay bonuses for low and middle income workers. And that's another piece that's of great interest, where there is a bill that is probably not going to go anywhere. We call it the Zlotnick bill, which provides an additional 3 years of retirement for anyone who is a public employee and a frontline worker. And I think that this $500 million in the conversations that I heard several months ago is the antidote to passing that piece of legislation to give people who basically put their lives at risk, I guess, during the pandemic, a bonus. So we're hoping that we can get that moving along very quickly. $150 million to enhance workforce opportunities and $100 million for vocational and career technical education. Senator Pacheco managed to get on the Senate side $1 million for the TMLP for clean energy efforts in the community. However, that's going to move forward in terms of the implementation of the use of those resources. And as a freshman legislator, I was pleased to be able to get earmarks, $40,000 for Our Daily Bread, $56,000 for the District Center for the Performing Arts, $5,000 for Girls Inc. In my presentation to the joint committee, I said, well, if you don't let me have the $5,000, I guess I'll have to write the check on my own to help Girls Inc. And they're very pleased with that. And so we have managed to get something that's very specifically Taunton in that regard. And then the broader amounts of money will be distributed accordingly through grants and other procedures to support the work that you're doing. So that's where we are with that. We're certainly hoping that good things will come of it and come before the holidays, but the legislative process is very interesting. And what goes on in the conference committee, the ordinary legislators are not privy to at this point in time, but we'll soon find out. Very often, I either check the front page of the Boston Globe to see what I'm doing as a legislator, or read the State House News, which comes out 2 or 3 times a day that somehow has the inside track on what the legislature is doing. So thank you for the question. And I'll take any questions on that as well. So
thanks, Carol. I'll move on to the next one. Can you please share your work on creating a teacher diversity commission and how we might be able to assist you? This is from Laura Douglas, president of BCC.
Yeah, so I see President Douglas here. Good morning. Good morning to everyone, of course, but to President Douglas as well. And This is a bill, among others, that I filed. If you're interested in taking a look at it, it's House 573, which has already had a hearing. And it focuses on establishing a special commission on creating a more diversified teaching workforce in the Commonwealth. This piece of legislation was really born out of a conversation that I had with President Douglas and also President Clark at Bridgewater, who were still frustrated with the inability to really grasp a consistent procedure to recruit young people, particularly people of color, into higher education and then on a pathway to teaching. And it's really critical to be able to have teachers, whether it is in the K through 12 sector or in the higher education sector, who reflect the population that is sitting before them in their classes and to be reflective of the community. And as we hear in Taunton, particularly all around the state, our population is becoming more diversified, yet our teaching force is not. And I think that it is not for want of trying to reach out to identify people of color who are interested in teaching in Taunton and in our higher education institutions, but also they're just not available. And there's a high competition for people of color across the Commonwealth and not across the country. So this bill proposes to create a commission of interested people, higher education people, K through 12 people, superintendents, school committee people, community, to come together to take a look at what already exists in terms of recruitment efforts, and then create an environment where we have a baseline of efforts to recruit more people of color into the teaching profession, and then develop beyond that the unique approach based on the higher education institution, based on the community where these teachers would be coming, so that we can together across the Commonwealth, particularly in our gateway cities, recruit more people of color to reflect better the people who are sitting before them in their classrooms. So I'm very pleased that the higher education community is supportive of this bill. There are 4 or 5 other pieces of legislation that are similar to this. So I just have a feeling that there's going to be some positive response of the leadership in the legislature to move this bill forward and begin the work of trying to define quite how we're going to get people of color, more people of color, into our classrooms and in front of our kids. So let's hope it happens this year.
Thank you, Carol. The next question is, what do you anticipate being providing businesses and nonprofits in fiscal 22 to continue to bounce back from the pandemic? Obviously, you talked a little bit about ARPA. There's a concern that we are being given provider relief funds to use to staff this year, but the concern is, what does the following fiscal year look like?
Well, certainly, as we witness in the ARPA bill, and there are some 50 pieces of legislation before the Economic Development Committee, as well as the Small Businesses Committee, that speak to recovery of businesses, small businesses, particularly in the Commonwealth. And you can go to the mass.gov website and take a look at the section that is, it says COVID-19 resources and guidance for businesses. There's just a whole broad range of information, from grants that you can apply to other kinds of things that are technical assistance and other kinds of things that are supportive of your efforts to recover from the pandemic. So there are a few things. Obviously, you know very well what has impacted you and what is keeping you from moving as quickly forward in terms of getting back on your feet as you would want to. So inflation is part of the difficulty. The inventory pipeline, I'm sure some of you can speak about how difficult it might be for you as a retailer, as a manufacturer, as a restaurateur, it is to get workers to come in and support your efforts to continue to put you on your feet. So during the pandemic, there was a bill called an act to address challenges faced by municipalities and state authorities resulting from COVID-19. And that was enacted in 2020, and it extended the deadline for property tax payments and waived late fees for overdue property taxes. And it also, as all of us well know, allowed restaurants to include beer and wine in their takeout menu. So I don't know how many of you are restaurateurs, but that was something that restaurateurs really wanted to have happen because it helped to kind of support their business. And that, and also outside dining, I think, was one of them. There was another act called Enabling Partnerships for Growth. There is money in the ARPA bill for training. Like you, as a business person, I, as an ordinary citizen, drive around town and see signs all over the place recruiting people with extraordinary bonuses, high starting salaries, that kind of thing. And part of the difficulty, I think, from the legislative perspective is making sure that we have enough resources to give you to provide an opportunity for you to bring in new people and train them to your industry. So that's really, really important. So there's money in the ARPA bill for training, and the legislator is very keen on that kind of thing. So there's also, as I said, there's 500 million in the State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. I think that that's one of the things that's really important to you, when we can speak in detail about that in a minute. And there has been $60 million that was transferred to the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation to be distributed through grants to small businesses as well. So there is a continuing effort on the part of the legislature, with you in its lens, to enact some of the 50 pieces of legislation that are going to be helpful and supportive to you, particularly to the human services industry as well. Making sure, for example, there's a bill that provides an opportunity for human service workers to create a pathway for human service workers to get their license, so that they can get more quickly into the industry, and to help to support you by providing more resources, perhaps for the anticipating the increase in the minimum wage as well in January. And lastly, I'm told that what is being heard by the committees who are dealing with this legislation is that the one thing that comes up relatively frequently is that the need for trained workers. So those resources are in the ARPA bill to help to support your efforts to train workers and to create training programs at the state level as well. So it's a very complex system. It is important for us to keep you in our lens and to make sure that you get what you need. And I'd also like to hear from you for you to tell me what it is that you believe you need, so that I can advocate for that as well.
Thanks, Carol. The next question is, are there any updates in regards to infrastructure?
Well, I read the paper this morning. So there are always those regular news updates, but what I can tell you is that, as you well know, it is an $8 billion gift, I guess, to Massachusetts through the infrastructure bill. So again, I asked Senator Rodrigues about how we were going to begin to discuss as a legislature, what was the process that we were going to use to begin to identify how that money should be used and how much of it is going to come across the Commonwealth. I mean, there are 200 of us, including the Senate, 160 of us in the House, and the rest in the Senate. And all of us have projects that we are interested in for our community. Some time ago, I guess the speaker learned a lesson. If you may remember, way back in the summer when the ARPA funds were first announced, the governor very quickly made some determination about how he felt he wanted those resources to be used. half of which would have stayed in his office, with the rest being disseminated by the legislature. And so in the case of the infrastructure funds, as it looked like the bill was going to be passed all through the summer, the speaker made the determination that he was going to reach out to the legislature to ask us what it was that we felt our communities might need should this bill at the time be adopted and come down for our dissemination here, particularly at the local level. So I reached out to Mayor O'Connell to ask her what it is that she had on her list of important infrastructure projects that would be useful for me to put forward to the legislature as the third Bristol district piece of it. In Easton, they're having a very difficult time with PFAS in their water system. And they are going to be required, in order to mitigate that situation, $10 million to build a water treatment plant, where they have never had to have that before. So that was one of the projects that Rep. Cronin, my colleague, put on the table for the use of infrastructure funds, and which I supported. And so I'm going to share with you what Mayor O'Connell told me she needed and what I put on the table, and we'll see what happens. So she had asked for $35 million for land treatment of wastewater from the city's wastewater treatment plant. The site, as she writes, will dispose of 1.8 million gallons a day of treated wastewater from the plant. And so $35 million to help to support wastewater treatment. $26 million for new water storage tanks at the Prospect Hill Reservoir. Presently, we have 2 tank reservoirs which are covered with floating covers. I didn't know any of this until I asked the mayor about this. I don't know if you know about that. I had always had the impression that we had pipes coming from the reservoir right to our kitchen faucet, so not necessarily. So as the reservoir so I guess the tanks sit on an embankment, and they are considered high risk. So the storage tanks, the new storage tanks, would replace the reservoir, and is the best solution for long-term solution for our potable drinking water. So 26 million, 12 million to replace 2 bridges, one located, they're Taunton Raynham. One is located over the Taunton River on South Street in Raynham and Old Colony Avenue in East Taunton. And the second bridge is located on Danforth Street over the Mill River. And 3 million for water meter replacement for Taunton and Lakeville. So you can see where we're focusing. And from information that I have gotten from Congressman Auchincloss, he has said that there is a great attention paid in the infrastructure bill at that level to issues like this, clearly infrastructure issues. So those are the things that the mayor considers to be really critical and important. Another item she suggests is 30 to 60 million for a public safety building. You've probably heard about the possible purchase, if not the already purchased land over on Route 140 for about 40 acres there for a public safety facility and other kinds of things that will go on that property. And 10 million for renovation of the Council on Aging facility. So all infrastructure projects, all projects that are meaningful and useful to our community. So these are on the table. As of yet, I don't know what the process for disseminating those resources will be, but one is hoping that some of this, even one project of substantial sum to the community, would be funded through the infrastructure money. So I doubt very much that we will be, well, clearly we're not going to be dealing with any of this until after the first of the year, but I'll certainly keep you abreast of it. As Senator Roderick said yesterday, that we have now more money than we have ever had previously in the Commonwealth, much like other states. So we are very fortunate in that circumstance. How to use that money so that it is important and supportive of your work and the work in the community is really the challenge, making sure that it's not money frivolously applied, but used for projects that have been on hold for many, many years. And it lessens, at least at the local level, the responsibility of the taxpayer to pay for those pretty substantial and necessary projects.
Thank you, Carol. I understand we have a message in the chat. For some reason, I'm not able to see that, but Lisa has told me that we have a message in the chat. Lisa, would you mind just letting us know what that message is?
Sure. It's from Sue Murray with Seed. She said Seed was fortunate to receive a $1.1 million grant with Mass Growth Capital in the last round of funding. We are hopeful there may be another opportunity to apply for additional funds. The funds are going fast, evidencing the ongoing gap in equitable access to capital in the Commonwealth that still exists and was exacerbated by the pandemic. Any support for us would be greatly appreciated.
So thank you for that. I think that there is a second round of opportunity that's going to be, if it hasn't already been put before the public. And in that regard, I have received several requests from people just like you. I'm looking at Zulmira from AHS, who has asked me on 2 occasions to please provide a letter to whatever agency it happened to be to help to support something that they have been trying to do. Telehealth is one of those, one of the things that they have been trying to do. So I'm more than happy to provide support, to provide my voice in your behalf, and to provide letters and follow up to the extent that those letters are paid attention to. And I really do think that the more effort that we make as legislators to help to support your ask is what my work should be. So I need to hear from you about those kinds of things.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. How will the Build Back Better bill, say that 3 times fast, affect our community?
Yeah, well, we know that the Build Back Better bill is somewhere between the House and the Senate at the federal level, that there is a lot of political back and forth about what that bill contains and how large it is. And it has been whittled back from $3 trillion, so $3.5 trillion to $1.9 trillion. And according to this morning's Globe, that it probably will be whittled back again when it gets to the Senate. But I think at the end of the day, so this is the part of the efforts on the part of the federal government to provide resources for recovery to communities that speak to human infrastructure. So the $8 billion that the state will get in the infrastructure bill does just that. Infrastructure, roads and bridges, transportation, electric buses, all of that kind of thing. Where the Build Back Better bill contains things that focus on climate change, for example, and mitigating the effects of climate change on our communities in the Commonwealth. It speaks about childcare issues, which we know are absolutely essential. The childcare industry fell upon hard times, obviously having a direct effect on families during the pandemic, and exposed the flaws in our childcare system, or early childhood education, as well as daycare. The pandemic exposed the flaws, the high cost of childcare, and the paucity of childcare, quality childcare that exists. And so I think that this bill will help to support things like higher wages for childcare workers, pathways to credentialing for childcare workers. The other aspect that's connected very tightly to childcare is early childhood education, universal pre-K. Anything that one might read about early education for our youngsters points to the fact that we need to create a universal system that is going to provide opportunities for our little guys to come to school. about 5 or 6 years ago, the Taunton Public Schools developed a plan to expand its pre-K program, and these are for 4-year-olds. We managed from that time forward to open 3 new classrooms, all of which are located at the Mulcahy, 2 from in the old Mulcahy, and then an additional one when the new Mulcahy opened. And the plan is to have at least 1 pre-K program across every single elementary school. That's an enormous support for families, obviously an early start for our kids, and really important. And so the Build Back Better promises resources that are going to help to support that growth. So we'll be looking at that very, very carefully. So just those items, I think those items alone are very important and practical for our community. And clearly you have childcare, you have families that are able to go to work because quality childcare is available to them, and it affects our small businesses, our retail operations, and otherwise provides an opportunity for people to have resources available to them so that they can go out and turn those resources back into the economy, helping your business and helping the community as well. So who knows what will ultimately come forward in support of these initiatives that are contained in that bill, but we have a great deal of expectation in that regard. In the Build Back Better bill, the money, so what needs to happen is that you define the way in which that's going to be used at the state and local level, and you don't have to spend, it's all kind of metered out over 10 years, and so it isn't spent immediately. With the ARPA bill, it's the same kind of scheme that we have up to 3 years to make a plan to use those funds, and then 2 more years after that to expend those funds. So it isn't immediately, we've got these billions of dollars and they have to be spent immediately, but it gives us an opportunity to think very clearly about what the continuing needs of the Commonwealth are and our local communities. The other piece of the ARPA bill, as you may know, is that the city, through the mayor's office, has ARPA funds, and she probably mentioned it when she came to visit with you. And I believe the mayor's office, so you would make a proposal to the mayor's office for the utilization of funds, something that you would need, and then that would be determined by the administration in terms of the use of those funds. I can't articulate, I only know one piece of ARPA funding this summer, a considerable sum of money for a summer program for our high-risk kids, a very successful summer program, $265,000 worth of funds that were put to that program. And we hope that we'll be able to continue that in the next summer as well. So together with the local funds and the statewide funds, I think that Taunton is in a good position in that regard.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks for the clarification on as far as the expensing of the funds, the planning and the expense in that time frame. That's helpful. The last question, previously submitted, is there movement on, this is back to our UI trust fund question. So if you want to address that.
Oh yeah, so that's a complicated, so let's see. You just check my notes. So all of you know what all of you are quite clear about the impact of the pandemic on the Commonwealth and on your business. My office dealt with over 100 people who were asking for support in getting through the unemployment system so that they could be assured that they would receive their unemployment checks during a very difficult time. And the UI Trust Fund was quickly drawn down with a huge number of people that were asking for support. So you and people like you across the Commonwealth have asked the Commonwealth, obviously, to deal with the impact that building back the UI Trust Fund would have on you and your business. And so the state created a commission to take a look at how that could be done and what changes could be made, lessons learned from the pandemic, what changes could be made in that, putting resources into that trust fund that would be beneficial to the Commonwealth as well as to your individual business. The commission's report is due on the December the 15th. One of the difficulties that, so I'm told, and so I read, that the state is having with the difference between what some people believe is needed to shore up that UI trust fund, 500 million. At the other end, some are saying it needs 2 billion in order for it to come even. And the governor apparently on a regular basis is supposed to provide data to help to support that decision-making. And that data has not been forthcoming to this commission that needs that information in order to make a firm decision. So what they went ahead and did is to put $500 million into the ARPA funding to help to support to help to mitigate the impact on you and on your needs. So the commission is made up of business people. It's made up of labor folks. It's made up of policy people from the governor's side and from the legislative side. And they are working diligently to try to mitigate the situation to have less of an impact on you. So what we do know is that the governor borrowed money from the federal government in order to support the trust fund during the pandemic. So we owe the federal government $2.3 billion. So according to the people who know the numbers, and tax policy is very difficult for me anyway to navigate, that leaves a deficit of $600 million that we have to make up. So our 500 million that's put into the fund, people on the commission feel that that's sufficient at the moment. So that's pretty much where we are. So 500 million, and I don't, as I said earlier, we don't know what the conversation is that's going on at the conference committee level and whether or not they're looking at increasing the amount of money that has been appropriated by the House side of the legislature for the trust fund. What we do know is that we want to, again, mitigate the impact on you in order to make up for what it is that we need from the past, pay off the federal government, and then make sure that there is enough in that trust fund so that it doesn't negatively impact you. So the commission is looking at how much the state's going to need now and going forward in order to shore up that trust fund. They have to look at how much is owed to the federal government and balance that with whatever it is that they're going to put into the trust fund. And again, there are no regular reports from the governor's office in order to help that decision to be made. And they're also, and you would understand this, I think, more than I, they're looking at long-term solutions such as raising the wage base from the $15,000 wage base that exists. And apparently that $15,000 wage base has been in existence for many, many years. So they're looking at that as a way to help to support your whatever it is that you are putting into that trust fund. They're looking at pegging the increases in what goes into the trust fund to an inflation factor as well. So that's a very complicated answer to a short question. 500 million right now is on the table to take care of the UI trust fund in the short term. And the commission is working on changes and long-term solutions going forward. So wait for the next chapter.
Thanks, Carol. And thank you for being so responsive when, we were approached, we did approach you about supporting that reimbursement of the funds from ARPA. And I appreciate your quick response on that. So thanks for that. That was the last submitted question. I'll open it up. If anyone has any follow-ups or any news or helpful information for the group. You can take yourself off mute, I think. If you can't, raise your hand and I'll do it for you. Oh. All right. Well, I'll just keep talking for a little bit longer just to wrap things up, but certainly jump right in if you think of something that you'd like to ask. So obviously, thank you all for being here, and Representative Doherty was very informative for our guests. And I want to thank our sponsor, the Lopes Companies. Unfortunately, our board chair, Debbie Dutra from the Lopes Companies, could not be on this call today. She sends her best and we thank her for that sponsorship. Programming note, I hope you'll join us next Thursday at noon for our chamber chat. For those of you who've been, it's just a fun and informal time for folks to get to know each other a little bit more personally on a virtual call. And we have some polling and trivia and prizes. So hope you'll join us for that. And then our holiday cocktail party in person, hopefully, if Omicron stays out of the picture, is December 15th at the Home Plate. So we're looking forward to celebrating this year together on that day. All the information about both of those events is on the website. So that's my programming note. And if nobody has any other things to say, looks like no. Go ahead, Carol.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's very important for me to hear from you. If there's a piece of legislation that you're curious about, if you want to know what the status of it is, if there's some information that you feel that I need to have in order to continue to navigate through this morass of various pots of money that's coming forward, particularly as we look at the infrastructure bill and we look at the Build Back Better bill. The legislature is going to be asked about how we want to use those funds. And I've explained a little bit about what the mayor has asked in terms of the infrastructure bill, but you must have ideas about what it is that you believe that your business needs or what our community might need, something that we have overlooked. And so hearing about what that is would be really, really important to me. And any kind of support that you need by way of letter or signing on to a piece of legislation or providing you with additional information, just let me know what that is and I'll be sure to follow up. So lastly, I took a tour of GTR, the newly opened business out in the industrial park, and I found it to be extremely interesting and what's the word I guess I use, informative for me, having an opportunity to tour that plant, to talk with the personnel there, to ask questions and to answer questions. And so I very much enjoy coming to your particular place of business to talk with you further on a more intimate basis and also to tour your facility and answer any questions that you have. So by all means, I'm readily available and would very much enjoy knowing more about you and about what you do and about what your needs are. So that would be very much appreciated. And lastly, and I said that before, thank you very much for the invitations to ribbon cuttings. I enjoy ribbon cuttings very much. So please continue to invite me, Chris, on behalf of the chamber. I'd be glad to participate in any way that I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you for always responding and being, and attending the ribbon cuttings. We love them too. Obviously, it's a great celebration of our business community and their success. And it's such an exciting day for everyone. So I appreciate how willing you are to attend, considering with the busy schedule that you have. So, and what a great offer that you've made to our members to visit their places of business as well. So I appreciate that too. Thank you. We shared your email information in the chat. So if people want to take a look, if you weren't sure how to get in touch with Carol, her email is right there. Certainly you can always reach out through me as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll let people say goodbye. If you want to say goodbye, I think we'll take everyone off mute or take yourself off mute. Feel free.
Thank you so much, Representative.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very
Happy
much.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Stay healthy.
You too. Thanks, Laura. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Chris.
Bye. Thanks, Carol.